All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going on a musical journey, but not just any musical journey. This one is pretty unique. We'll be exploring 1991 with Liat Portal, and well, she's a writer who's, I guess you could say, using music to tell her story.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about Liat is that she kind of combines, like her life as a kid during the Gulf War, and she was living in Israel at the time, only 11 years old, actually. And she connects all that with, like, the huge changes in music happening in 1991 all over the world, and even some stuff from 2024, like her challenges then. I don't know, it's really different, I think.
It's funny, like when a song comes on and it just throws you back to a certain time.
Yeah.
Liat, she's basically made like a whole project out of that. Her podcast, The Liat Show, My Journey to Infinity, it's almost like a time machine. But instead of like a DeLorean, it's this playlist, but it's also like a love letter to 1991.
Yeah.
A big year for music, but also for her personally.
And she doesn't just like play the hits, you know what I mean? Let really gets into what was happening in the world back then, like globally, and she connects it with what it was like for her as a young girl in Israel. It's pretty cool.
It really is. It's like using music to understand not just your own life, but also kind of like the whole world around you. So what are some of the key things that come up in her story?
Well, one thing that really stands out is MTV. Liat talks about how in Israel, like, she didn't have access to a lot of stuff from the outside world. So MTV, it became like this window to a whole other world, this whole culture, really. And suddenly she's hearing grunge and alternative rock, music that came from like a totally different place than hers, but it really spoke to her. Think about that for a second, like how music can connect people across like huge distances and different cultures. Pretty
Sure.
amazing, right?
It's powerful. It's like music has this way of bringing people together no matter the language, where they're from, even political differences. You know what I mean? And hey,
Right.
speaking of connections, this isn't the first time Liat's worked with music journalist Kevin Alexander. They actually did a project together before
Right.
about the music of 1971, believe it or not.
Wow, yeah, that's right. It's pretty cool they teamed up again, right? Especially considering, their backgrounds are so different. Light in Israel, Kevin in Portland, but the music, it's like a common thread, a bond that just brings them together.
Totally. And I think that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We get these two different perspectives on the music of 91. Liat's coming from like a place with a lot of political stuff going on and her own personal growth. And then Kevin's from this super vibrant music scene. So it's like music can mean different things to different people, but still have this like universal power.
And to really get 1991 and its impact on music, you got to remember what was going on in the world, like big picture stuff. I mean, think about it. The Soviet Union was falling apart. There was all that tension in the Middle East. Ron Arad was being held captive. And in Israel, Liat, she was living through the Gulf War. It was a tense time for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And it's against that backdrop that something really amazing happened in music. In just 44 days, 7 huge albums were released, and they totally changed the landscape of rock music, like forever.
It's almost like there was this shift, These albums, they weren't just popular, they were like game changers. They really defined what the 90s sounded like and influenced tons of musicians.
And here's where Liat's storytelling gets really interesting. She doesn't just list these albums. She takes us through each one, connecting them to what she was going through, what was happening globally, even her own creative journey.
Yeah, and it's not just nostalgia. She looks at how those albums still matter to her now, what they say about how she's grown, and even how they connect to her project today. It's pretty cool.
All right, so let's talk about these albums. First up, Metallica, the self-titled album, the one everybody calls the Black Album. Metallica was already a huge deal in metal, but this album, it's like they shifted to a more melodic sound, but they didn't lose their intensity, not at all.
Exactly. You've got massive hits like Enter Sandman, The Unforgiven, Sad But True. You still hear those on rock radio all the time. And Kevin, he's a big Metallica fan. He tells us a great story about listening to Enter Sandman while he was driving around, which, I don't know, it just makes it all more personal somehow.
And then, boom, Pearl Jam explodes onto the scene with 10. This is grunge front and center, and man, you can't overstate how big this album was.
I mean, those videos, Alive, even Flow, and then Jeremy, so powerful, but also like really controversial. They captured this raw energy, like real emotions, thing we hadn't seen before. And then Black, it wasn't even released as a single, but it became huge because it was so emotional.
And what's cool is Kevin's perspective on Pearl Jam. He actually saw them before they were like megastars, and he's really surprised they've kept going, and being so successful shows you how powerful their music is, I guess.
And get this, only a few weeks later, Guns N' Roses, who were already like giants. I mean, they had Welcome to the Jungle and all that. They dropped not one, but T-Doobie-O albums on the same day. Use Your Illusion Eye and Use Your Illusion Through. Talk about a bold move.
Ambitious, for sure. But it worked. Both albums hit #1, which really cemented their place in rock history. They had huge songs on there. November Rain, with that epic video. I mean, who doesn't remember that video? Don't Cry and You Could Be Mine. Which was in Terminator 2. I mean, come on.
It's cool to hear Liat talk about November Rain, like her brother's a guitarist, and she talks about imagining him playing that huge guitar solo. It just adds another layer to it.
Those details are what make her storytelling so great.
Right.
And then there's Kevin, who's honest about not being a big fan of the Use Your Illusion albums at first, but he's come around. It just shows you, like, our taste can change, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of change, buckle up, because within 3 days, 3 more incredible albums drop. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger, and, wait for it, Nirvana's Nevermind.
Yeah, 1991 was a whirlwind for music fans. Each of those albums brought something new, pushing the boundaries, and they really influenced where music went from there.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, they brought this funk energy to rock with Give It Away, and then there's Under the Bridge. So personal. They weren't afraid to experiment, which made them stand out.
And Soundgarden, they might not have been as popular in Israel back then, but their album Bad Motorfinger, it was huge for grunge, It had this heavier sound. And Kim Thayil's guitar playing, man, unbelievable.
And then, of course, Nirvana. The album that became like the sound of the 90s, maybe even one of the most important rock albums ever.
It was a phenomenon. I mean, it was huge. It had everything. Anthems like Smells Like Teen Spirit, and then the raw, vulnerable songs like Something in the Way. Nevermind captured this feeling of, I don't know, angst, disillusionment, a whole generation's feeling, really.
Yeah.
And it really connected with people.
And Kevin, he was lucky enough to see Nirvana when they were just starting out. He said it was one of those shows where you knew you were seeing something special.
It's amazing to think about how much those albums, all released so close together, have impacted things. They changed music, fashion, even how people felt about the world changing. But what's even more amazing is how this music connected people from different places, like Liat and Kevin.
And that's just the beginning of their musical journey through 1991. We'll be back to dive deeper into their experiences and, see how this music still resonates today. But before that...
Hold on. Before we move on, we have something important to share. We all love discovering new voices, new stories, right? Well, Liat is doing something really special with The Liat Show.
Yeah, she's really combining history, music, and personal experience in a way that just pulls you in, makes you think. It's something that deserves more people to hear it.
And that's where you come in. If you're liking what you're hearing, go to Liat's YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button. She's trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the month so she can be nominated for a Rising Star Award. Your support could really make a difference.
And just to add to that, we're throwing out a challenge to all our listeners. Make a reel, a short video, whatever, and share the Liat Show with your friends. Get creative, make it cool, and the most viral, the most creative entry, you win a prize. We'll share the details on our social media, so make sure you follow us.
Back to 1991. We'll be back with part 2, where we'll keep exploring these albums with Liat and Kevin. Stick around.
So we're back, diving deep into 1991, those albums that, changed everything. We were just talking about Nirvana's Nevermind before the break.
And, Nevermind. It was more than just, catchy songs, right?
Yeah.
It was this huge thing culturally. I mean, it helped a whole generation deal with some heavy stuff.
It had this crazy range from the anger and Smells Like Teen Spirit to that, vulnerability and Something in the Way, Nirvana, their music, especially Kurt Cobain's lyrics, they just got to something real, something about, being human.
Liat makes this point about how Nevermind helped people deal with, difficult emotions, sadness, anger, even trauma. I mean, heavy stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't just about, rebelling or being angry. I mean, that was there for sure, but there was also this feeling of, understanding, it's okay to not be okay. And that connected with a lot of people all over the world, especially young people who were trying to figure things out.
And we can't forget what was happening in the world at the time, all that stuff.
Absolutely. For Liat, 1991 in Israel, it was a tough time. The Gulf War, it was this constant thing, this fear, and those Scud missile attacks, that was real.
She was only 11, can you imagine? Trying to understand a world that felt so, I don't know, shaky, anything could happen. But music, it was like this safe space, a way to connect to something bigger.
It's interesting, how differently its experience was compared to Kevin's in Portland. He talks about 91, like, it was this amazing time for discovering music, like new bands every weekend. He could drive himself to concerts, record stores. It was like there was this optimism, like anything was possible.
It's wild, right? Almost like two different worlds, but they both loved the same music, finding meaning in it, connecting through those songs. It says a lot about the power music has, I think.
And that's where MTV comes in. Liat, growing up in Israel, she didn't have access to a lot of Western media, so MTV was huge for her. It's how she discovered grunge. And that whole scene started thousands of miles away, but it felt like so relevant to her.
It's crazy to think about MTV. Back then, it was pretty new, right? And it helped bridge all those gaps geographically, culturally.
Totally changed the game. Suddenly, kids all over the world, they were watching the same videos, hearing the same music, even dressing the same. It created this shared culture, even for people living in totally different situations.
Liat calls it a sonic bridge, which I think is a perfect way to put it. It connected people across borders, different cultures. It created this feeling of community.
And it's not just about the music, it's about what it makes you feel, the memories it brings up, the conversations it starts. Music can tap into something we all share. It reminds us that we're not alone in our struggles, our joys, even our search for meaning.
Thinking back on the music of 91, it's sad. Some of the people who made that music, they're not with us anymore. Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell, their deaths hit a lot of people hard.
Yeah, it reminds us that life is fragile, and that art, it can last forever. Their music, it still inspires people, moves them even after all these years.
And that brings us back to Liat's project and why it's so important now. She's not just looking back. She's looking at how that music changed her and how it still affects her today.
Right, she's connecting those memories, with what was happening in the world, looking at the music, talking about the culture, and she's doing it all with so much passion and a real desire to connect with people.
And she needs our help to keep telling those stories. Liat, she's independent, so she really relies on her listeners to make the Liat Show happen.
If you're enjoying this deep dive, there are some things you can do to help Liat out.
First off, go to her YouTube channel and subscribe. She's trying to hit 1,000 subscribers this month, so she can be considered for YouTube's Rising Star Award.
Every single subscriber helps, and it would be awesome to see her get recognition for her work. It's really something special.
And don't forget about our challenge. Show us your creativity. Make a reel, a short video, anything, and share the Liat Show with your friends.
Let's get Liat's story out there, introduce more people to the power of music, how it connects us all across time and space.
Speaking of connections, Liat and Kevin working together, it really shows you what can happen when people share a passion. It can bring people together no matter where they're from.
It's their second time collaborating, which is pretty cool. You can tell they just click. Their conversations, they're smart, but also fun to listen to.
And the fact that they have different perspectives, it makes it even better. Liat, she brings that personal connection to the music and the historical context. And Kevin, he's got that music journalist background, and he's a lifelong fan, so he adds a lot too.
They bounce ideas off each other, share stories, even disagree sometimes, but it's all good-natured. It's like you're hanging out with them, just chatting about music and life.
And that's what makes the Liat Show so special. It's not just a podcast, it's a community. Liat's creating a space where people can connect, share their own memories about music, and explore what that music means to them.
It reminds you that music is more than just something to listen to. It's powerful, it can connect people across generations, cultures, even entire continents.
And that's a message worth spreading. So tell your friends, subscribe to Liat's YouTube channel, and come back for part 3 of this deep dive. We'll be exploring the final chapters of Liat and Kevin's journey through 1991.
Welcome back. It's been quite a journey. We've been going deep into 1991, exploring those albums, the ones that really made a mark.
We've talked about everything, right? The Berlin Wall coming down, the Gulf War, and of course all those incredible albums that, well, I guess you could say they defined that era.
Yeah, and what I keep thinking about is how Liat tells her story. It's not just, listing things off. It's more like a tapestry or something. She weaves in memories, history, and of course the music. It's like the soundtrack to it all.
It's true. Her project, The Liat Show, My Journey to Infinity, it's definitely more than just looking back at music. It's like a journey of self-discovery, right? And it really shows you how music can shape our lives, how it connects us.
One thing that's really cool about Liat is that she's so honest. She talks about her struggles, things she's not sure about, and that makes her story even more interesting, I think.
I agree. It's refreshing to hear someone talk about the past and not just, the good stuff. It makes her journey feel real, something we can all connect with.
And she doesn't just stay in the past, you know? She's always finding these links between then and now, like the things that were hard in 91, they connect to what we're going through today.
Like when she talks about the Gulf War, how scary it was,
Mhm.
and how that feeling, that uncertainty, it connects to what it was like for her in 2024, dealing with, I don't know, the world being so complicated. It's like
Yeah.
times change. But some things, how we feel, what we struggle with, those things stay the same.
And her working with Kevin,
Yeah.
it really shows how much a shared passion can like bridge the gap between people.
It's amazing they've worked together twice,
Yeah.
actually. And their connection, you can just hear it, right?
Yeah.
They have this great back and forth, sharing ideas, different perspectives. Sometimes they even disagree, but it's always respectful.
It's like listening to two friends who really know their stuff and they're just having this conversation about music, about life.
And that's what makes the Liat show so different, I think. It's not like you're just being told things. It's like you're part of the conversation.
Right. And Liat, she really wants her listeners to think, to question things, to figure things out for themselves. It's a really cool way to experience a podcast.
Before we wrap things up, we got to talk about supporting creators like Liat. Especially these days, it's tough to get your voice heard.
Yeah, she's putting so much into this project and she really needs our help to get it out there.
So seriously, if you haven't already, go subscribe to her YouTube channel. She's trying to hit 1,000 subscribers this month so she can be nominated for YouTube's Rising Star Award.
It would be so great to see her get that recognition. So spread the word, tell your friends, anything you can do to help her out.
And don't forget about our challenge. We want to see your creativity, so make a reel, a short video, whatever you like, and share the Liat Show.
Let's get Liat's story out there, show the world how music connects us. So what's the big takeaway from Liat's story? What really stuck with you?
For me, it's how powerful music is, how it can take you back in time, connect you with others, even help you understand the world.
Yeah, and the importance of like sharing your story, finding that common ground, even when people are so different. We've been focused on Liat's 1991, but what about you? What album, what musical moment, like, defined your teenage years? What takes you back to that time, those feelings?
Think about it. What's your musical journey? You might be surprised by what you find.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Liat Portal's world. Hope you enjoyed it.
Make sure you check out The Liat Show, subscribe to her channel, and keep exploring the music that moves you.
Until next time, keep diving deep.